And a couple of these things started happening on the show, and Lila turned to Dan and said, you know, we're doing the supernatural. These are ghosts. We're doing a ghost story. And Dan had this kind of leonine look that came on his face, and he just sort of grinned. And he knew the direction he was going in. The ratings were tumbling, and he decided to go for the supernatural. And it was his daughters who did make the suggestion. And that's when he really went full steam ahead and brought on the vampire. May I just mention there were a couple of other firsts that Dan really pulled off that nobody had ever thought of before. Doing an anthology series that really drew on the world's great literature. I mean, we did everything from Melville and Henry James.
Yeah, Jane Eyre was the original.
Exactly.
Was the Crazy Children.
That's right. That's right.
We did Frankenstein
and to do
Dracula.
Right, and to do these, to do like an anthology series was already a departure. But then, when I think I was the first actor on the show to play another character, and I will tell that story because I think a lot of these people.
Well, you played as many as 5 different characters.
I played 4, but my second character was Josette, and that happened. Again, it was a first. I came to the studio one day to pick up scripts, and I wasn't supposed to work another couple days. And I picked up the scripts at about 4 in the afternoon, and I saw June, the wardrobe woman, and Bob Costello, who was the producer, with this clothes dummy. And they had some lights on it and a fan on it, and they put makeup and a wig and some tattered pieces of lace, and it was blowing. And I said, what are you doing? And they said, well, there's this character of Josette, and she's leaped off with the water, and she's come back. And I said, what do you think this looks like? And I said, it looks like a clothes dummy. And they said that they needed it for the next day. And then Bob turned to me and he said, would you stand in for the dummy? So they put the wig on me and the lace and the makeup and the whatever, baby oil with a lot of talcum in my hair, and the fan on my eyes, which made my eyes tear, and I lifted my arms and made this, silent, kind of scream, and it was so effective that Dan took a look at it and decided that I should be Josette Dupre. So that's how I got the role. It's one of those things when opportunity knocks. It was totally accidental. A picture had already been painted that was hanging over the mantel that bore no resemblance to me, but the longer I played the role, the more people said, gosh, that's just like her. So anyway, Dan got away with that, and ABC, the network executive, said, but you can't have the same actress playing 2 different roles. You lose the audience. And he said, no, they'll get it. And they did.
So then it became a repertory company, and every time we died, we came back.
Would you talk to just a little bit about the character of Angelique? And also, you mentioned earlier that there's a scene where you were hanged that had left you with a profound memory. Would you talk about that?
Oh, you mean in the film you just saw?
Well, you mentioned it earlier that you were hanged, correct?
Well, actually, there are 2 different roles. The Angelique on the TV show is different from Angelique in the film. You guys know that.
Oh, yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about the evolution of the character from the beginnings?
Well, sure. I mean, when I came on the show, I thought I'd been cast as the heroine. I mean, the main guy was, we were having an affair, and, a lot of kissing in my bedroom. And so, as a young actress, I worked a lot on being able to cry on cue. So, I did a lot of preparation so I could cry. And they took me aside, somebody took me aside one day, I think it was Leela Swift, the director, and she said, honey, you have to stop the crying. You're not the ingenue. You're the heavy. I said, no, I don't want to be the villain. She said, no, you are the villain. And you have the plum role. Ingenues will come and go, but there'll never be another one. So, I stopped crying. So that's really how the wonderful thing about being on a soap, which is very different from being cast in a film or doing a play, is that as the days go by, they start to write for your special qualities, your idiosyncrasies, your uniqueness, and they start to pull the best of you. Don't you agree? You start to, as the character evolves, and it becomes more you. And but I never really let go of, really wanting to be the heroine. So I think that Angelique always had that hunger that she wanted to be the princess of the piece, and she didn't get to be this one, that one. Was the princess.
John, you asked earlier if we had any special questions. It leads me to say, because we're talking a lot about it being a ghost story and supernatural and vampires and all of that sort of thing, but a couple of people came up to us when we were up in the mezzanine earlier today, and they talked about something that I'd really sort of forgotten about, and that is that the fellow that played, or my father, as Maggie Evans, was a drunk. He was an itinerant painter, and she said, what really struck us was how you were so caring, and you took over taking care of him, and you had such a sweet relationship, and so on. And I thought back to that. That was in the very, very beginning of Dark Shadows. And she said, you really dealt with a lot of serious things. Well, it's true we did. And as a young actress, I had no family experience of alcoholism to draw on, but there was the script, and it was sort of not pointed to, but it was there. And I think, and I explained it to these two people by saying it was really instinctual, and it was that who Maggie Evans was, and you sort of grow into that character. The writers see the way you're reacting to it, and they write toward it. I totally agree with what Laura is saying. But it also reminds me that even though we were dealing with these these huge themes and this great literature and supernatural stuff, we were also dealing with it in a totally straightforward way. We weren't camping it up at all. And we really did deal with some serious things. And for the entire time that I was on Dark Shadows, and to this day, I get letters from people saying, you really helped me through some terrible years. My dad was an alcoholic too. And it's really meaningful when you realize that whatever you did helped somebody else through a bad time.
I would like both of you to talk a little bit about the film we're about to see, The House of Dark Shadows, which actually was made before Night of Dark Shadows. So this is the film that both of you appeared in, correctly?
No, I was in the one you just saw, and Catherine's in the one you're about to see.
I got it backwards.
I get it backwards all the time.
House of Dark Shadows was a labor of love that I think Dan Curtis had in his mind for a long time. And Dark Shadows, as you know, because if you've read any of the books that I've published on Dark Shadows, it started out with Dan Curtis's dream about this girl who was on a train. And it was a dream he had when he was still in the Army. And it became the very opening sequence of the television series. And I think he'd always had in mind that he wanted to make this into a film. And he was trying to put the money together, and he would actually take a little group of us around to various people. Joe Levine was one of these producers, to try to get the money to do this. In the end, he put Dark Shadows together for $900,000 for MGM, and it made a huge amount of money and actually saved MGM for another year or two, because most of the other films that came out that year failed. But again, Dan Curtis got us all together. He drew upon everybody in the show to do this. Lila Swift mentored him as a director, and he directed several episodes of Dark Shadows, the TV series before start the film. Everybody pitched in to help him. And he then, on the first day of filming, took us all aside and said, this is our budget. The only way we do this film is if everybody cooperates and because
One take.
Of course, we were used to that. I actually got 2 takes and I didn't know what to do with that section. I thought, did I make a mistake? It was amazing.